Bueno, muy buenos días para todos. Mi nombre es Fabián.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fabián Inthamoussu, and I work in the development team of GeneXus and in the generators for the Apple platform. Did you know that in 6 months' time you won't be able to upload applications to the store? With the trouble is that Apple has announced new restrictions for the applications as from April next year. Apart from this piece of news, it is well known that most users in the Apple platform are kept updated in the latest versions. So for us, it is most important to be updated to the latest features. This is not only happen when we develop using GeneXus. If I do it manually, I've got the same problems. Now the difference is that if I do it with GeneXus, it's far easier to be kept updated. This isn't the first year that this happens. Last year, the same thing happened. Apple introduced new restrictions that must be abide by as from March, and GeneXus did it as from upgrade 1 that was released last year. This is what I'm going to be talking about. What should you do to be kept updated in this platform? Because this is very important. I'm going to divide my talk in 3 parts. First of all, I'm going to tell you about what's new and the things that we've introduced in Apple platform, and let's see what the restrictions are by Apple and what you have to do to support them through GeneXus. And then lastly, we're going to see what's coming in operating systems and how we can support them with GeneXus and what we're going to continue working on. Let's start with what's new and what we've introduced lately. One of the new things is support for languages from right to left, like Arabic and Hebrew. When I want to make developments for this type, I have to look at the user interface. GeneXus invert the order of the tables. It adjusts properties like padding, margin, border, and it does it inverse. The position is inverted. And we've also made specific adjustments of the type of controls. For instance, control tab inverts the order of tabs. If you have a group with multiple columns, then the order is adjusted automatically. However, there is a small case where you may need to do it manually, and this refers to images. Imagine you have an image that has one direction, for instance, the back button. If you put an arrow in the right to left and you want to invert it, for this kind of cases, we've added a new property, which is flips right to left, which is a Boolean, and it indicates whether it has to be done from right to left. In relation to languages, in our upgrade 5 of GeneXus in KA, we have added new translations for Arabic, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, and Portuguese, apart from English, Spanish, and Japanese, which were already there. When you create multi-user apps, S13 adds a new characteristic so the final user can choose at the level of application what language to use. Instead of using the language of the operating system in all applications, I can choose a language in each application. And this is good when you are prototyping an app or when you're using the KB. Another characteristic in GeneXus is the WebSocket. Now, WebSocket is a technology that allows you to have a bidirectional communication with a server in real time. When I want to develop something like a chat, and I have to receive and send messages in real time. iOS 13 introduces native support for WebSockets. In the previous versions, we are using a third-party library to be able to support it. This feature for you as GeneXus users is transparent. There is one single GeneXus, and you don't have to worry about it. Another characteristic that we've created in the upgrades is support to recognize the data in a credit card. The purpose is to facilitate the entry of data using the camera of the device. GeneXus is an external loader with one single method that has an SDT as a return value, and there you are returned all the data that the camera has recognized, and there are several properties that you can configure that you may be interested or that you think are important in the card. Another piece of news is that we have a new user control, and that's called relative timer, that can be used to show the relative time between a certain date and now. Here I'm showing you two examples. For instance, if in my application I want to tell you how long there is to the date of the event, I simply put the date and I don't have to worry about updating it. The other case is the case of the Mexican League, and I know how long has the match been going on. And here you have many matches and allows you for flexibility as to the aspect of what you want this to be shown, I mean the relative time to be shown. Another something new introduced in the upgrade also is the new user control to know the state of the application. What do I mean by the state of the application? When you have to know whether it's active or inactive in the background. There is an event to find out when the state changes. What's this for, this new user control? Let me give you an example so that it's clearer. Just imagine that you have an app to make orders to a restaurant. There's a popular one here called Pedidos Ya. You are in the middle of an order, doesn't complete it, goes to background and uses another app. But then it comes back. But when it comes back, the restaurant was making the order, placing the order, it has closed. There's no sense for the user to complete its order and give him an error, but the user experience is going to be much better if when the user goes back to making the order, he gets a notice saying you can't do it now. Now, for instance, if in a bank app, if that app goes to background, you may want to be shown certain information or not. There are many, many other pieces of news that we've introduced in the upgrades. I haven't got enough time to see them all with you, but you can see the notes of the upgrades and see what more there is to it. Let's go to the second part now. What are the restrictions that Apple will introduce next year, and what you have to do to support it? Now, there are four. The first one is related to the version with which you can upload applications. As from next year, you'll have to use SDK and S13 in the case of Apple 3, Watch 06, and it has to support the screens of Macs. As regards the size of the screen, well, they're already supporting in the case of SDK. The next upgrade of GeneXus, which upgrade 6, will support the characteristics, so we're going to be covered.
La restricción que impone Apple a partir del año que viene.
Launch images is something that are no longer being supported. Instead of launch images, you will have to use a storyboard. Storyboards is a file that describes the interface of a screen. And here, for instance, this is the storyboard of the KN simulating the interface of my first screen. With the KN, it seems that the application is being executed, and that's the objective. Why does Apple included this new requirement? Well, the first thing is that launch image is not badly used, because the objective, the goal was that that the application was already there, and there were cases to be done. That there were cases where branding was used for branding, and that's not a correct use. Now, the second new objective for this change that Apple made is that when Apple introduces a new size of screen, a new device, all the applications that were on the store were executed in a compatible mode. They were not using all the screen. As from iOS 13, by using storyboards, these new launch images are generated, and then our applications are going to be compatible with the new devices to be launched in the future. We're going to be including this in future upgrades of GeneXus, so that you don't have to worry about this, and the property that you were allocating to launch images is not going to be there in iOS, and according to the properties of applications such as theme and navigation style and so on. If what GeneXus generates is not enough, because you have other needs, you'll be able to personalize it and include the storyboard as a file object in the KB. The third new restriction that Apple imposes for its apps is related to the user interface of applications. It says that they must be flexible. What I mean by this is that in an iPad, for instance, multitask that Apple introduced is that you can execute more than one app at the same time, sharing the size of the screen. This is going to be a requirement for applications, except for some apps that are games that can be executed in full screen. At present, the GeneXus apps that we generate for iPad are for full screen, but I'm going to be introducing a support for this multitask. I'm going to do it using a concept that you already know, that is multiple layouts. At present, you're using multiple layouts for different devices. If you have an app for iPhone, if it's compatible with iPad, and another one for something else. Now we're going to be using all the layouts that you design, and you can apply to the same device, and the one you're going to show depends on the space you have available on your screen. This is also going to be available in the future upgrades. And the fourth and last restriction refers to Apple authentication. Apple has introduced its Apple authentication in all its platforms. That's similar to what you already know regarding Facebook or Google authentication. Now you're going to have an authentication with your user, as an Apple user. As regards privacy, Apple is not focused on publicity. He means advertising. Apple doesn't do that. There are also things that have to do with privacy. User may wish to share with you its real mail, or there is a new type of mail for each application, and Apple would redirect it to the original account. Now, what's the new restriction regarding this point? If your applications does login with third-party service like Twitter, Facebook, and so on, Google, it's going to be compulsory to include it in your Apple applications. If you do log in with a counter and password, this requirement doesn't apply. It's optional. But if you log in with a third-party service, this is going to be a requirement. For you, GeneXus user, this is going to be a new type of authentication in the GAM. It's going to be supported in the future upgrades. These are the 4 new requirements that you'll have to take into account into your apps. Let's see what other news there is and that you can adopt with GeneXus. The most visible piece of news as S13 is what we know, dark mode. In iOS, we have a dark side, so that we are all on the same page. I'm not talking about this in iOS. I'm talking about an aspect, a feature. iOS apps will be able to have a dark or a clear or a light appearance, and you'll have to be able to support it. Basically, in your apps, you have a color palette, and what you'll have to do is you'll have to create a new color palette, and there those that have a dark background will have to change for dark and vice versa, and adjust the contrast of some other colors. This is basically the large part of the work that you'll have to do. However, just by changing this is not enough in some cases. If I've got some images that use shadows, if I transfer that image as such to a dark shadow, then shadows in dark are not seen that well, so it's better do it with lights and with how brilliant the screen is. So apart from the color palette, you'll be able to change images in their light and dark appearance. Now, how do you support this with GeneXus? As from the new theme, you create a new one to inherit all the properties of the present theme. And the property of the color palette will be allocated the dark appearance and the dark theme, and in the light one you'll get a new property. It's going to be dark new, and there you make reference to the other theme that you've just created with a dark appearance. And lastly, in the main object of the application, you're going to have a new property called Enable Preferred Color Scheme. Basically, that property declares that your application supports the light and the dark one. To be able to make it compatible with the present design, it's recommendable that you adopt both themes, the base color scheme and the other one, because your users will expect it to be modern and support the two ones. The base color scheme is used in previous operating system version, not supporting this, and here you declare which of the two variants to choose or support. This property is already in the UV6. It's going to be available for you. The next piece of news is related to context menus. iOS 13 introduces the concept of context menu, and this gives users to make actions related to an element in the interface. This concept is very similar to the one that Apple introduced some years ago called Pick and Pop, but there are some advantages. Pick and Pop was only working in iPhones, having a screen that hardware was supporting it. Context menus work in all technologies, just with a laptop. It works with with a gesture of laptop if it doesn't support it. Pick and Pop used an extra gesture and it's shown automatically. In GeneXus, we're going to create support for this characteristic, and we're going to do it by using a concept that you already know. It's action groups. You're going to be able to associate action groups to the context menus. The next piece of news that Apple announced this year, and I think that for us was the one no one was expecting. I think this is the most important piece of news that Apple has introduced this year is Swift UI. This is a new framework to develop user interfaces. It's a declarative and modern framework. Similar, you're probably used to using declarative screens where you declare whatever you want and you don't worry about changing the state or keep updated. Well, the Swift UI is exactly that. It's declarative and modern. And it's compatible with all Apple platforms. It works on iPad, Apple Watch, and Mac, Apple TV, etc. At present, Apple used to have a framework for each type. For iPhone and Apple TV, it's developed with Wicked, and in Apple Watch is used with a framework that is completely different. In Mac, there is another one for interface, completely different. And now, looking at the future, Apple has created Swift UI, and we think that the future of the user interface for Apple platform is going to be soft UI. As it happened some years ago for programming language, Apple introduced Swift, and now it's replacing Objective-C. Swift UI is going to be the future for the user interface. In GeneXus, we're going to adopt Swift UI, and we're going to start with the watch generator. Why are we going to start with the watch generator? Well, because Watch It, which is the one used for the Apple Watch, is where we have the largest number of restrictions. We couldn't use it with runtime and dynamic editing, and we didn't have it. So Swift UI is going to allow us to do many things. If we adopt it in Apple Watch, the large part of the hardware is going to be compatible with Swift UI, and wouldn't have to leave out much hardware. Furthermore, Swift UI is going to be used for the future of user controls in GeneXus. The user control outset that it's in the KB. You've probably heard about it, but there was a talk by Federico Salomon that you can watch it again in a video. The user control is going to facilitate the creation of user controls in Apple platforms, and we're going to use Swift UI for that. This is a brief summary of some of the new things that OS is introducing. There are many more into artificial intelligence. There are improvements. Siri is improved, and many others that we don't have time to discuss here. There are other talks by Jose Chavez. He's going to be talking about artificial intelligence and some other talks as well. Many of the things I've said is not only for the iOS generator, but also for the Apple and Apple TV. This is authenticated in all platforms. Swift UI is for all platforms. The new dark mode, apart from iOS, Apple TV generator supports it and is compatible as from version 10 onwards. There are also specific pieces of news to each one of these platforms. For instance, for Apple Watch in the latest version, the support makes applications to be independent and doesn't require an iOS application to be executed. In Apple TV, it's adding a support for multi-users, and we are going to be working on these characteristics for each one of the generators. And something that I've left for the end, this is the latest Apple platform, and that's Mac. Mac OS, as I said, the development of applications in Mac is much less popular than the other Apple platforms, and this is basically because of what I said. There is a completely different framework for user interface, and developers have to do a lot of extra work. So Apple is attacking this problem from two fronts. As we said, this is the future, and the future is going to be Swift UI. In the short term, Apple released developers the possibility of using the framework that was using for iPhone and iPad, and that can also be supported for Mac applications. So we're going to be adopting this technology in the short term, and you'll be able to have support for applications for a new generation for Mac OS. And the way of developing Mac OS applications is going to be the same way that you're used to using, the same model. You only have to create a new layout for this platform, and you'll have it available for Mac OS. This is what I wanted to share with you today. As we've seen, there are many new things that we've introduced in this past year to keep you updated in Apple platform that we think is very important. There are new restrictions that are compulsory for you to adopt. Otherwise, you won't be able to upload applications as from next year. But as you've seen, GeneXus is going to support all these characteristics. We've also seen the new things that are introduced in the operating systems, and we recommend that you should adopt them and include them, because users are going to expect them to see them in your applications. If the tool is ready, this is your work to be done. Thank you.